Picture this: a battlefield where flames erupt from thin air, where bronze shields crumble like brittle parchment, and entire armies are swallowed by plumes of smoke so thick it's as if the earth itself has opened up to claim them. These aren't scenes from myth or fantasy. They're glimpses of a hidden chapter in history, one where ancient warriors wielded weapons so advanced, so terrifying, that their secrets were buried for centuries. What if the stories of legendary battles weren't just tales of brute strength, but of forgotten sciences, of alchemy turned into warfare? Today, we're pulling back the veil on the alchemy of ancient warfare, where fire, chemistry, and ingenuity collided to rewrite the rules of combat. Think about the moment when a single invention changed everything: gunpowder, the stirrup, the catapult. But what if there were others, lost to time? Scrolls burned, recipes erased, and entire technologies suppressed because they were too powerful to survive the ages. From the mysterious Greek fire that could burn on water to the rumored Archimedes' death ray that harnessed sunlight as a weapon, ancient battlefields might have been laboratories of destruction, where science and strategy fused in ways we're only beginning to understand. Who were the minds behind these innovations, and why did their knowledge vanish, leaving only fragments and whispers? This isn't just about weapons, it's about the shadows where history and mystery meet. How many battles were won not by numbers but by secrets? How many empires rose or fell because of a single, devastating innovation? We're about to trace the threads of these lost technologies, separating legend from reality, and asking the provocative question: did ancient warfare have a hidden edge, one that could melt armor, turn tides, and rewrite destiny? The answers might surprise you, so join me as we step onto the battlefield of the past, where fire and ingenuity forged the fate of civilizations, and where the echoes of these ancient secrets still linger, waiting to be uncovered. Alchemy wasn't merely the stuff of medieval dreams, transforming base metals into gold or chasing the elixir of life. In the hands of ancient warriors, it became something far more practical and far more deadly. Imagine a science so advanced for its time that it could bend the elements to human will, turning fire, water, and metal into weapons of unimaginable power. This was alchemy in warfare, a fusion of chemistry, metallurgy, and sheer ingenuity, all aimed at one brutal goal: dominance on the battlefield. Take Greek fire, for example. This infamous substance, wielded by the Byzantine Empire, wasn't just flammable, it defied the laws of nature. Tossed onto enemy ships, it clung to wood and sails, burning even on water. Historians still debate its exact composition, but the effect was undeniable. A weapon so fearsome, it could turn the tide of naval battles in an instant. Some accounts suggest it contained quicklime or naphtha, ingredients that would ignite on contact with moisture. Others whisper of secret additives, known only to a select few craftsmen sworn to secrecy. Either way, Greek fire wasn't just a tool of war. It was a psychological terror, a blaze that couldn't be quenched, leaving enemies paralyzed with fear. Then there's Damascus steel, the legendary metal that forged blades sharper and stronger than anything else of its era. Swords made from this material could slice through lesser weapons like parchment, their edges retaining a razor's sharpness even after brutal combat. Modern scientists have tried to replicate its properties, but the original techniques, likely involving precise carbon content and intricate forging methods, remain lost to time. Was it alchemy that gave Damascus steel its near-mythic qualities, or simply metallurgical mastery so advanced it seemed like magic to those who faced it? But perhaps the most unsettling applications of alchemy in warfare were the early forms of chemical weapons. Ancient armies didn't just rely on brute force, they manipulated the very air their enemies breathed. During sieges, some forces burned toxic mixtures of sulfur and pitch, creating choking clouds that forced defenders out of fortified positions. The Romans even used stink bombs made from rotting animal carcasses to demoralize foes. These weren't random acts of cruelty, they were calculated experiments in psychological and physiological warfare, leveraging alchemical knowledge to exploit human weakness. What's striking about these innovations isn't just their destructiveness, but how they straddled the line between science and superstition. Alchemists weren't just tinkerers, they were the closest thing the ancient world had to engineers, blending observation, experimentation, and a touch of mysticism. Their work wasn't about whimsy, it was about survival, supremacy, and the relentless pursuit of an edge in a world where victory often meant the difference between empire and oblivion. And yet, so much of their knowledge vanished, burned in library fires, buried with inventors, or deliberately erased by rulers afraid of what might happen if such power fell into the wrong hands. That's the real mystery here, not just how these technologies worked, but why they disappeared. Were they too dangerous to preserve? Too difficult to replicate without the right masters? Or were they simply overshadowed by newer, more conventional weapons, lost to time like so many other marvels of the ancient world? One thing's certain, the alchemy of warfare wasn't just about fire and steel. It was about the relentless human drive to harness the unknown, even if it meant walking the fine line between genius and hubris. The flames that refused to die, that's what made Greek fire the nightmare of Byzantium's enemies. Imagine a naval assault where every splash of water only spread the blaze further, where sails and wooden hulls became kindling for an unstoppable inferno. This wasn't ordinary fire, it was a weapon so potent, so terrifying, that it became the Byzantine Empire's ultimate trump card. The secret of its creation was guarded more fiercely than gold, known only to a handful of artisans and the imperial family. Lose the recipe and you lost the war, that's how high the stakes were. What made Greek fire so devastating wasn't just its flammability, it was how it defied logic. Unlike ordinary flames, it couldn't be doused with water. Some accounts suggest it even burned hotter when wet, thanks to a possible mix of quicklime, which reacts violently with moisture. Add petroleum or pine resin to the formula, and you had a sticky, clinging fire that seared through ships and flesh alike. The Byzantines deployed it through pressurized bronze tubes, spraying it onto enemy fleets like ancient flamethrowers. The effect was psychological as much as physical. Imagine witnessing your entire fleet engulfed in a fire that water couldn't stop. Panic would spread faster than the flames. One of its most legendary uses came during the Arab sieges of Constantinople in the 7th and 8th centuries. Outnumbered and outmaneuvered, the Byzantines turned to Greek fire as their last hope. As enemy ships closed in, streams of liquid fire arced across the water, igniting hulls and sending crews leaping into a sea that offered no refuge. The invaders, who had never faced anything like it, retreated in disarray. Time and again, Greek fire saved the city, earning it a reputation as divine intervention, God's own wrath delivered through alchemy. Yet here's the puzzle: if Greek fire was so effective, why did it vanish? The last confirmed use was in the 13th century, and by the Renaissance, even the Byzantines had lost the recipe. Some historians believe the secret was deliberately suppressed. Knowledge that powerful was dangerous. If it fell into enemy hands, it could topple empires. Others argue the ingredients became too scarce, or the artisans who knew the craft died without passing it on. There's a darker theory, too. that the weapon was too horrific even for its creators, a line crossed in the heat of war that later generations chose to forget. The legacy of Greek fire isn't just about lost technology, it's about the ethics of invention. Where's the line between brilliance and brutality, between survival and savagery? The Byzantines wielded this weapon not just to win battles but to shape history, and in its disappearance we're left with a haunting question: are some secrets better left buried? Damascus steel wasn't just a weapon, it was a masterpiece of ancient engineering, a blade so finely crafted it seemed to defy the limits of metal itself. Picture a sword that could cleave through armor without chipping, its edge remaining razor-sharp even after countless battles. These weren't just tools of war, they were works of art, their surfaces etched with flowing, watery patterns that shimmered like captured lightning. But what made them so extraordinary? The answer lies in a blend of rare materials, forgotten techniques, and a dash of alchemical mystery. The story begins with Wootz steel, a high-carbon alloy forged in ancient India and traded along the Silk Road. Craftsmen in Damascus, then a hub of metalworking, transformed this raw material into blades of legendary quality. The secret wasn't just in the steel itself, but in how it was treated. Trace elements like vanadium and tungsten, impurities in modern terms, played a crucial role. When the steel was heated, folded, and hammered repeatedly, these elements created microscopic structures that gave the metal its unique strength and flexibility. The process wasn't just about brute force, it was a delicate dance of temperature and timing, passed down through generations of smiths. Modern scientists have spent decades trying to recreate Damascus steel, but something always seems missing. Even with advanced technology, the blades they produce lack the same resilience and sharpness. Some theories suggest the original Wootz ingots contained rare ores from specific mines, now exhausted or lost. Others point to the quenching process. Perhaps ancient smiths used exotic liquids like pomegranate juice or animal urine to cool the metal, altering its crystalline structure in ways we still don't fully understand. The truth might be simpler. These craftsmen weren't just following recipes. They were artists who understood their materials on an intuitive level, adjusting their methods based on the feel of the metal and the color of the flames. The legacy of Damascus steel isn't just about lost techniques, it's a reminder of how deeply intertwined science and craftsmanship once were. These blades weren't mass-produced. Each one was a unique testament to the smith's skill and patience. In a world where most weapons dulled after a few clashes, a Damascus sword could last a lifetime, becoming a treasured heirloom passed down through generations. That's why so many ended up in the hands of kings and conquerors, from Saladin to the Crusaders who faced them in battle and marveled at their quality. Yet, like Greek fire, the secrets of Damascus steel faded with time. By the 18th century, the last masters of the craft had vanished, taking their knowledge with them. Was it the collapse of trade routes that cut off the supply of Wootz steel? The rise of gunpowder, which made swords less relevant? Or simply the slow erosion of a tradition too complex to sustain without patronage? Whatever the reason, the loss leaves us with a tantalizing question. How many other ancient technologies reached heights we can't yet replicate? The story of Damascus steel isn't just about a sword, it's about the fragile thread that connects us to the ingenuity of the past and the sobering realization that some secrets once lost might never be found again. The quest for eternal life led to one of history's most lethal accidents. In the bustling laboratories of Tang Dynasty China, alchemists toiled over elixirs meant to cheat death, mixing sulfur, saltpeter, and charcoal in delicate ratios. Instead of unlocking immortality, their cauldrons birthed something far more volatile, a flickering, hissing powder that erupted in sparks and thunder. This was the birth of gunpowder, a discovery that would ripple across battlefields for centuries, turning the art of war into a science of explosion. At first, gunpowder's potential was anything but obvious. Early recipes from the 9th century describe it as a fire medicine, used in fireworks to ward off evil spirits. But by the Song dynasty, 300 years later, the same powder was propelling arrows from bamboo tubes and hurling clay grenades packed with shrapnel. The Chinese military didn't just adopt gunpowder, they weaponized creativity itself. Take the fire lance, a primitive but terrifying ancestor of the modern firearm. Picture a spear tipped with a bamboo barrel stuffed with gunpowder and pellets. When ignited, it unleashed a burst of flame and projectiles, effective at close range and devastating to morale. These weren't just tools of war, they were psychological warfare, designed to shock and scatter enemies who'd never faced such fury. Yet the real breakthrough came with the thunderclap bomb, an early grenade that combined gunpowder with iron scraps or porcelain shards. Wrapped in paper or bamboo, these handheld explosives could maim entire ranks in a single blast. Siege warfare would never be the same. Defenders rained down bombs from city walls, while attackers packed them into tunneling operations to collapse fortifications from below. The noise alone was weaponized. Accounts describe explosions so loud they could be heard miles away, shaking the earth like divine wrath. What's striking isn't just how quickly gunpowder evolved, but how its spread was shaped by trade and secrecy. The Silk Road carried knowledge westward, but the Chinese guarded their most advanced formulas closely. By the time Mongol armies adopted gunpowder in the 13th century, they'd combined it with their own brutal tactics, using catapults to lob explosive shells into enemy strongholds. When these technologies reached Europe, they ignited an arms race that would reshape continents. The very substance alchemists once hoped would grant life instead became the cornerstone of destruction, a paradox as explosive as the powder itself. Perhaps the greatest irony lies in gunpowder's dual legacy. The same innovation that birthed fireworks celebrated for their beauty also mechanized slaughter on an unprecedented scale. It's a reminder that progress rarely travels in straight lines. What begins as a spark in a healer's crucible can become a conflagration that alters the destiny of nations. And in that transformation, we glimpse a deeper truth. The most revolutionary discoveries often come not from intention, but from the unpredictable alchemy of curiosity and chance. The story sounds like something straight out of legend. Brilliant inventor Archimedes, standing atop the walls of Syracuse, directing an array of polished bronze shields to focus sunlight onto invading Roman ships until they burst into flames. It's a dramatic image, one that's captured imaginations for centuries. But could this so-called death ray have actually worked, or is it just another tale where history blurs into myth? Modern researchers have put the claim to the test with results that might surprise you. Take the experiments conducted by students at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in 2005. Using a scaled-down replica of the described mirror array, they managed to ignite a wooden ship mock-up after several minutes of concentrated sunlight. The catch: the conditions had to be perfect clear skies, a stationary target, and precise alignment of the mirrors. In the chaos of an actual siege, with ships bobbing on waves and smoke filling the air, the practicality of such a weapon becomes far less certain. Another team from the University of Arizona tried a different approach, using nearly 500 square mirrors to recreate the effect. They succeeded in creating scorch marks, but not the instantaneous combustion described in ancient accounts. The physics behind the idea isn't impossible. Solar concentration is a real phenomenon, as anyone who's used a magnifying glass to burn paper can attest. But the scale and precision required for a full-scale death ray pushed the boundaries of ancient technology. Archimedes was undoubtedly a genius, credited with groundbreaking work in mathematics, engineering, and optics. Yet even for him, directing enough mirrors to set a fleet ablaze would have been a staggering challenge. Some historians argue the legend might stem from a misinterpretation of his actual inventions, perhaps reflecting sunlight as a signaling device or using polished metal to dazzle and disorient enemy crews. What's fascinating isn't just whether the death ray was real, but why the story persists. It speaks to our enduring fascination with the idea of a lone inventor turning the tide of war through sheer intellect. Archimedes himself became a symbol of ingenuity under pressure, designing massive cranes to topple Roman ships and possibly even early forms of artillery to defend Syracuse. The death ray, whether fact or fiction, fits neatly into that narrative, a weapon so advanced, so elegant in its simplicity, that it feels like the stuff of legend. Even if the mirrors never actually burned a fleet, the tale reveals something deeper about ancient warfare. It wasn't just about brute force, it was about psychological dominance. Imagine being a Roman sailor, hearing whispers that the enemy could summon fire from the sky. The mere rumor of such a weapon could sow panic, disrupting formations and morale. In that sense, the death ray's true power might not have been in its flames, but in the fear it inspired, and that's a weapon no experiment can fully measure. So where does that leave us? Perhaps the death ray was an embellishment, a story that grew taller with each retelling. Or maybe it was a real, if imperfect, attempt at harnessing nature's power in ways that wouldn't be replicated for centuries. Either way, the legend endures because it challenges our assumptions about the past. It forces us to ask, how much ancient technology have we underestimated? And how many other myths might still hold a kernel of truth waiting to be uncovered? Roman concrete didn't just build walls, it built an empire. While other civilizations struggled with structures that crumbled under siege or weathered away, Rome's fortifications stood unshaken, defying time and enemy assaults alike. The secret wasn't just in the strength of their concrete, but in its almost magical ability to heal itself. Modern scientists have discovered that the key lay in a mix of volcanic ash, lime, and seawater, creating a chemical reaction that formed tiny crystalline structures within the material. When cracks appeared, rainwater reacting with these minerals would gradually fill the gaps, sealing the damage like a wound stitching itself closed. This wasn't just construction, it was alchemy in stone, a technology so advanced it outpaced the rest of the world for centuries. Consider the Colosseum, a monument to both entertainment and engineering. While the empires of Rome's rivals left behind ruins, this amphitheater endured earthquakes, fires, and invasions, its skeleton still towering over modern Rome. Compare that to the walls of Carthage or the fortifications of Gaul, which often failed under Roman battering rams. The difference wasn't just tactics, it was materials. Roman concrete allowed garrisons to hold out for months, turning sieges into grueling wars of attrition. A city with crumbling walls might surrender in weeks, but one shielded by this indestructible substance could wait for reinforcements or weather starvation until attackers gave up. In this way, concrete became a silent weapon, shaping the outcomes of battles before a single sword was drawn. Yet here's the mystery: this revolutionary recipe vanished after Rome's fall. For over 1,000 years, builders struggled to replicate its durability, leaving medieval castles and cathedrals far more vulnerable to decay. Was the loss accidental, a victim of collapsing trade routes and scattered knowledge, or was it something darker, an imperial secret deliberately suppressed to prevent rivals from matching Rome's might? Some historians point to the tightly guarded guilds of Roman builders, who passed down techniques orally, ensuring their monopoly. Others suggest the ingredients themselves became scarce, like the volcanic ash from Pozzuoli, which gave the concrete its unique properties. Whatever the cause, the disappearance of this technology hints at a chilling truth. Sometimes the most powerful weapons aren't blades or bombs, but the knowledge to outlast your enemies. Today, scientists are finally unraveling the secrets of Roman concrete, not just to restore ancient structures, but to revolutionize modern construction. Imagine skyscrapers that repair their own cracks or seawalls that grow stronger with time. The irony is profound. A material that once secured an empire might now help us combat climate change, reinforcing coastlines against rising seas. Yet the lesson goes deeper. Rome's concrete wasn't just a tool of war. It was a testament to the foresight of engineers who thought not in years, but in centuries. In an age where many of our own structures degrade within decades, their legacy asks us a humbling question. What if true power lies not in destruction, but in endurance? Elephants crashing through enemy lines weren't just beasts of burden. They were masterpieces of ancient military engineering, clad in armor designed to terrify as much as protect. Picture the scene, a wall of towering animals, their bodies sheathed in layered leather soaked in vinegar to harden like iron, their heads crowned with spiked bronze plates. Some even wore chainmail draped over their flanks, a mesh of interlocking metal rings that turned arrows into harmless pinpricks. This wasn't just protection, it was psychological theater, a calculated display of invincibility meant to shatter enemy morale before the first spear was thrown. Take Hannibal's legendary crossing of the Alps in 218 BC. His 37 elephants weren't just transport, they were mobile fortresses, their armor augmented with fire-resistant coatings of clay and wet sand to counter flaming arrows. Each animal carried a tower on its back, housing archers who rained death from above while the elephant's sheer mass trampled formations into chaos. The effect was devastating. Roman soldiers who had never faced such creatures described them as living mountains, their trumpeting alone enough to send cavalry horses bolting in panic. But the real innovation wasn't the elephants themselves, it was how they were weaponized. Armor transformed them from vulnerable animals into nearly unstoppable engines of war. Yet the genius of elephant armor went beyond brute force. Some designs incorporated hidden blades along the tusks, turning every swing of the head into a scything attack. Others had iron plates riveted to the forehead, allowing the elephant to batter down gates like a living battering ram. The Carthaginians even experimented with toxic paints, lacing the armor with irritants that caused choking fumes when heated by enemy fire. Every detail was engineered to amplify fear, because in ancient warfare, terror was as lethal as any weapon. So why did these living tanks vanish from battlefields? The decline wasn't sudden, but a slow unraveling of practicality. Elephants were expensive to feed and train, their armor requiring teams of specialized craftsmen. As armies developed tighter formations and better anti-elephant tactics like the Roman testudo shield walls that funneled them into pits, their impact waned. But perhaps the greatest irony lies in their legacy. The very innovations that made elephants terrifying also made them obsolete. By the Middle Ages, the resources needed to armor a single elephant could outfit dozens of knights, tipping the scales toward human soldiers. What remains is a testament to ancient ingenuity. These weren't just animals draped in metal. They were prototypes of combined arms warfare, blending mobility, armor, and shock value in ways that wouldn't be seen again until the rise of modern tanks. Their story forces us to reconsider what true military innovation looks like, not just new weapons, but the relentless reinvention of fear itself. Pliny the Elder's writings contain a curious footnote, one that sounds more like science fiction than ancient history. He describes a glassmaker presenting Emperor Tiberius with a drinking bowl made of a miraculous material, glass that could bend without shattering. According to the tale, the craftsman threw the vessel to the ground, where it merely dented like bronze before being hammered back into shape. Tiberius, fearing such a substance could destabilize the value of gold and silver, ordered the artisan executed and his workshop destroyed. Was this just a tall tale, or does it hint at a genuine breakthrough in Roman material science? The implications for warfare alone are staggering. Picture legions armed with unbreakable shields, or archers peering through transparent, impact-resistant visors. Modern scientists have floated several theories about what flexible glass might have been. One compelling possibility is an early form of metallic glass, a hybrid material combining the transparency of glass with the malleability of metal. Today, we create similar substances by cooling molten alloys so rapidly their atoms don't crystallize, resulting in a structure that's both strong and elastic. Could Roman artisans have stumbled upon an analogous process by accident? Ancient glassmaking often involved lead, tin, or arsenic additives, which might have produced unexpected properties under specific conditions. Another hypothesis suggests the material wasn't pure glass at all, but a thin layer of flexible silica sandwiched between metal sheets, an ancient precursor to laminated safety glass. The military applications would have been revolutionary. Roman soldiers relied heavily on heavy, brittle bronze or iron armor that restricted movement. Flexible glass helmets or breastplates could have offered comparable protection at a fraction of the weight, transforming mobility on the battlefield. Siege engines might have been fitted with transparent shielding, allowing operators to aim projectiles while staying protected. Even naval warfare could have been reshaped. Imagine warships with unbreakable observation decks, giving crews an unobstructed view of enemy movements. The psychological impact alone would have been immense. An army wielding what appeared to be indestructible materials would seem invincible. Yet the complete absence of surviving artifacts raises troubling questions. If flexible glass existed, why didn't fragments surface in shipwrecks or ruins, as other Roman innovations have? Some historians argue the technology might have been too finicky to replicate consistently, dependent on rare ingredients or precise furnace conditions lost when the original craftsman died. Others propose darker motives. Perhaps the Roman elite suppressed the knowledge to maintain control over military advancements, much like Byzantium guarded Greek fire. There's also the chance Pliny's account was exaggerated, conflating a particularly durable type of glass with mythical properties. The legend endures because it challenges our perception of ancient innovation. We often assume technological progress moves in a straight line, yet history is littered with breakthroughs that vanished for centuries before being rediscovered. Flexible glass, whether real or embellished, forces us to wonder how many other ancient secrets were lost to political intrigue, accidental destruction, or simple misunderstanding. And in an era where material science is unlocking metamaterials and self-healing polymers, the idea that Romans might have glimpsed similar possibilities feels less like fantasy and more like a tantalizing mystery waiting to be solved. What if the past holds more surprises than we dare imagine, not in dusty scrolls but in the very stuff of the world around us? Deep beneath the Mediterranean waves, divers exploring a 2,600-year-old shipwreck off the coast of Sicily made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the archaeological world. 39 mysterious ingots of a reddish metal, their surfaces still gleaming despite centuries underwater. Chemical analysis revealed an alloy of copper, zinc, and traces of nickel, a composition matching ancient descriptions of Orichalcum, the fabled metal of Atlantis. According to Plato, this substance gleamed like fire, and adorned the walls of Poseidon's temple, prized above all but gold. But here it was, not in a lost city, but packed as cargo on a trader's vessel. What secrets did these ingots hold about how ancient warriors might have wielded such a metal? The alloy's properties suggest more than just mythical allure. Unlike ordinary bronze, which could corrode or become brittle, orichalcum's unique blend of metals would have offered exceptional resistance to seawater, making it ideal for maritime armor or ship fittings. Imagine naval battles where standard bronze weapons dulled after prolonged exposure to salt spray, while orichalcum blades retained their edge. Some researchers speculate the metal could have been used for elite ceremonial weapons, its reddish gold hue symbolizing divine favor in battle. The Sicilian ingots weren't raw ore. They'd been refined and standardized, hinting at an organized industry capable of producing this prized material at scale. Yet the real mystery lies in how orichalcum vanished from the historical record. By the Roman era, references to it had dwindled to poetic metaphors, its composition forgotten. One theory points to the exhaustion of key mines, perhaps zinc-rich deposits in Cyprus or Anatolia, where ancient smiths sourced rare additives. Others suggest the knowledge was deliberately lost, much like Damascus steel techniques, when wars or political upheaval scattered master metalworkers. There's even a tantalizing possibility that orichalcum wasn't a single alloy, but a class of advanced brass-like metals, each tailored for specific purposes. A fragment recovered from a Greek battlefield site shows higher tin content, potentially creating a harder variant for sword hilts or arrowheads. The gap between legend and reality narrows when we examine how ancient cultures perceived materials. To civilizations without modern chemistry, a metal that didn't tarnish or one that rang with an unusual resonance when struck might seem supernatural. Orichalcum's reputation as fire-bright could stem from its polished surface catching torchlight in temple halls or reflecting the sun on a champion's breastplate, creating an aura of invincibility. In warfare, psychology is as potent as steel. A warrior clad in gleaming orichalcum armor would command fear and reverence before even drawing a blade. Modern attempts to recreate the alloy have yielded fascinating insights. When forged under conditions mimicking ancient techniques, the metal develops a distinctive acoustic quality, a deep, resonant tone when struck, unlike the duller ping of common bronze. This raises an intriguing possibility. Could orichalcum have been used not just for weapons, but for battlefield communication? Gongs or horns made from the alloy might have transmitted signals farther and clearer across noisy battlefields, giving armies a tactical edge. It's a reminder that ancient innovations often served multiple purposes, blending the practical and the symbolic in ways we're only beginning to decode. The enduring fascination with orichalcum isn't just about metallurgy. It's about the human desire to bridge myth and history. Every time we recover a fragment or analyze an ingot, we're piecing together a puzzle that stretches from Plato's dialogues to sunken shipwrecks. Whether this metal was truly the stuff of Atlantis or simply an advanced alloy lost to time, its legacy challenges us to reconsider how much ancient technology might still lie hidden, waiting to be pulled from the depths, not just of the ocean, but of our collective memory. Heron of Alexandria's workshop must have seemed like a magician's den. Mechanical birds that flapped and sang, temple doors that swung open as if by divine will, even miniature theaters where puppet actors performed without strings. But hidden beneath the spectacle of these ancient automata lay principles so advanced they bordered on the prophetic. Gears, pulleys, and steam power weren't just toys in Heron's hands. They were the building blocks of what could have been the world's first war machines. Imagine a battlefield where arrows flew not from human hands, but from clockwork launchers hidden in the earth, or where fortifications bristled with automated traps triggered by an enemy's misstep. The line between wonder and weapon was thinner than we've been led to believe. Take Heron's Ballista, a design often dismissed as a theoretical exercise. This torsion-powered arrow thrower operated like a crossbow, but with a twist literally. Tightened ropes stored energy that, when released, could fire projectiles farther and faster than any human archer. Modern reconstructions prove its effectiveness, yet historians debate whether it was ever mass-produced. But here's the provocative thought. What if Heron's real innovation wasn't the device itself, but the concept of automation? His writings describe systems where gears and weights could reset the ballista after each shot, creating a rudimentary machine gun centuries before the Renaissance. Pair that with his work on pneumatic pressure, and suddenly you have the blueprint for a weapon that could fire relentlessly without fatigue or fear. Then there's the matter of psychological warfare. Heron's Eolipile, a spinning sphere powered by steam, demonstrated an understanding of reactive forces that wouldn't be fully explored until the Industrial Revolution. While it was presented as a philosophical curiosity, the underlying principle harnessing pressure to create motion could have been catastrophic if scaled up. Picture a fortified gate rigged with steam-powered pistons, slamming shut with inhuman force to crush attackers. Or consider his automatic door mechanism, which used heat and water displacement to create movement. Adapt that to a battlefield, and you have the potential for pit traps that opened beneath advancing troops, swallowing whole formations without a single soldier lifting a finger. The most chilling possibility lies in Heron's lesser-known automaton theater. These intricate puppet shows used strings, rotating drums, and precise timing to create the illusion of life. But replace the puppets with blades and the stage with a narrow mountain pass, and you have something far more sinister, a mechanized kill box. Tripwires could trigger rotating spikes, while weighted counterbalances might send boulders tumbling onto invaders. These weren't just fantasies. Heron's surviving texts include designs for devices that, with minimal modification, could become deadly. A wine dispenser that measured liquid with perfect accuracy. That same system could portion out gunpowder. A singing bird powered by compressed air, redesigned, it might become a whistle-tipped arrow, screaming through the air to demoralize enemies before impact. Why, then, didn't these inventions transform ancient warfare? The answer may lie in the fragility of knowledge. Heron's works survived in fragments, often copied by monks more interested in miracles than mechanics. The Alexandrian library's destruction scattered technical manuals like leaves in a storm, leaving later generations to reinvent what had already been conceived. There's also the question of intent. Heron lived under Roman rule, and his patrons likely preferred wonders over weapons, automata to amuse emperors, not tools to arm rebels. The most devastating applications of his work may have been suppressed or simply never pursued. Yet the legacy lingers. When Leonardo da Vinci sketched his war machines centuries later, he was walking a path Heron had already mapped. The difference, Heron's world wasn't ready for robotic warriors, but in the quiet of his workshop between the singing birds and temple marvels, the seeds of automation were sown, waiting for a future that would finally understand their power. The real mystery isn't whether Heron's inventions could have been weaponized, but how close we came to a world where clockwork armies marched centuries ahead of schedule. The Scythian archer didn't just draw his bow, he dipped the arrowhead in a concoction so vile, its recipe reads like a nightmare. A blend of viper venom, rotting blood, and animal feces fermented into a lethal paste, designed not just to kill, but to inflict suffering so grotesque it would haunt an enemy army's morale for generations. This wasn't merely warfare, it was psychological terror weaponized through biology. When that arrow struck, death came slowly, fever, paralysis, and gangrene setting in over days with no antidote in sight. The message was clear: cross the steppe warriors, and even survival meant agony. But the true innovation wasn't the poison itself, it was the delivery system. Unlike later civilizations that relied on complex siege engines, the Scythians turned their most basic tool into a biochemical weapon. Their short, recurved bows could launch venom-tipped arrows with terrifying accuracy, turning skirmishes into exercises in dread. Historical accounts describe besieged soldiers trembling at the mere sound of Scythian quivers rattling, knowing a single scratch could mean a torturous end. The terror outstripped the actual casualty count. An army paralyzed by fear is already half defeated. Yet the most chilling aspect of this tactic, its accessibility. While Greek fire demanded guarded recipes and Damascus steel required master smiths, any Scythian hunter could brew their own poison from local flora and fauna. Vipers were milked for venom, toxic plants like aconite were harvested, and the mixtures were aged in leather pouches until they reached peak potency. This decentralized production made the threat impossible to eradicate. No single workshop to destroy, no supply line to cut. The knowledge was as widespread as the grasslands themselves. How did ancient armies defend against such horrors? The Greeks, frequent targets of Scythian mercenaries, layered their shields with dampened hides to prevent arrowheads from fully penetrating. Persian forces reportedly experimented with early forms of padded armor, thick enough to absorb or deflect glancing shots. But the most effective countermeasure was arguably psychological: disciplined formations that refused to buckle under the fear of poisoned projectiles. Leaders like Alexander the Great understood that panic spread faster than venom. His troops were drilled to prioritize wound cleaning and swift amputations, turning a potential death sentence into a survivable injury. The legacy of these early biochemical weapons lingers in modern warfare's darkest corners. From mustard gas in the trenches to nerve agents in modern conflicts, the principle remains eerily similar: exploit the body's vulnerabilities to break the enemy's spirit. The Scythians simply did it with nature's own arsenal. Their tactics force us to confront an uncomfortable truth: warfare's evolution isn't just about bigger explosions or sharper blades, but about who can weaponize fear most effectively. And sometimes the oldest methods are the most enduring. The tunnels beneath Dura Europos should have been the Romans' salvation, a hidden passage to undermine Persian defenses and turn the tide of siege. Instead, they became a tomb. In 256 AD, Persian forces didn't just counter the Roman sappers, they weaponized the very air they breathed. When archaeologists excavated the site centuries later, they found the chilling evidence: a narrow, crumbling corridor stacked with skeletons, their limbs tangled in final agony, some still clutching tools. These men hadn't died in combat or collapse. They'd been suffocated by something far more sinister: a thick, toxic cloud of naphtha smoke, history's earliest confirmed use of chemical warfare. Naphtha wasn't just any fire starter. This volatile byproduct of crude oil, harvested from natural seeps in Mesopotamia, burned hotter and longer than wood or pitch. But the Persians didn't simply hurl it like Greek fire. They engineered its properties with brutal precision. Accounts suggest they pumped the substance into the tunnels, then ignited it with flaming arrows. The result, a conflagration so intense it consumed all oxygen in the confined space, leaving the Romans to gasp for air that wasn't there. Worse, naphtha's fumes carried toxic hydrocarbons, causing dizziness, nausea, and eventual unconsciousness before death. The soldiers at Dura Europos wouldn't have seen the flames coming, just a creeping, choking darkness. What makes this moment so pivotal isn't just the cruelty of the method, but the sophistication behind it. The Persians didn't stumble upon this tactic by accident. They understood fluid dynamics well enough to channel naphtha through pipes or animal bladders into the tunnels. They likely used bellows or pressurized containers to force the liquid deeper, ensuring maximum saturation, and they timed the ignition perfectly, waiting until the Roman sappers were too far underground to escape. This wasn't improvisation, it was calculated chemical warfare, leveraging geology, physics, and psychology in equal measure. The skeletons tell a haunting story. Some lie near collapsed tunnel supports, suggesting they tried desperately to dig their way out as the air turned lethal. Others are clustered around what might have been a last stand, shields raised against an invisible enemy. But the most revealing detail, the absence of burn marks. These men didn't die from flames. They were killed by the absence of something they couldn't see or fight, oxygen itself. In that sense, the Persians didn't just innovate, they redefined what a weapon could be. Fire was a tool, but air, that was a frontier. Yet the siege of Dura Europos raises a darker question. Why didn't this tactic spread? Naphtha was readily available across the Middle East, and the basic principles of combustion were hardly secret. The answer might lie in the very horror of its effectiveness. Chemical warfare demands a line be crossed, one that even ancient armies hesitated to breach. The Romans, for all their brutality, preferred clean kills to slow suffocation. Persian accounts later praised the victory but glossed over the method, as if uneasy with their own ingenuity. There's a reason we remember Greek fire but not naphtha traps. Some weapons are so grim, even history looks away. Today, the tunnels stand as a warning. Warfare's greatest leaps often come not from stronger steel or sharper blades, but from reimagining the battlefield itself. The Persians didn't just defeat the Romans at Dura Europos. They proved that innovation could lurk in the unlikeliest places, even the breath in your lungs. And in that silent, smothering darkness, they wrote a new chapter in the alchemy of war. One where victory didn't always go to the strongest, but to those who dared to weaponize the impossible. Imagine sailing across the treacherous North Atlantic under a sky so thick with clouds, not a single glimpse of the sun breaks through for days. For most ancient mariners, this meant hopeless disorientation, drifting blindly until storms or starvation took their toll. But the Vikings faced these conditions with eerie confidence, raiding coasts and crossing oceans with a precision that defied logic. Their secret, a seemingly ordinary crystal that held extraordinary power, the Sunstone. This wasn't just a navigational aid, it was a geomantic marvel. Calcite crystals like Iceland's spar have a unique property called birefringence. They split light into two beams. By rotating the stone until these beams align in equal intensity, a skilled navigator could pinpoint the sun's position even when completely obscured by fog or clouds. Picture a Viking captain holding the translucent stone up to the overcast sky, turning it slowly until the hidden sun reveals itself through polarized light. With that bearing, they could recalibrate their course using a sun compass, a wooden disc with markings that functioned like an ancient GPS. Recent experiments prove just how accurate this method could be. Researchers from Hungary's Eötvös University tested sunstones during overcast conditions in the Arctic, successfully determining the sun's position within 5 degrees of its actual location. That's precise enough to navigate from Norway to Newfoundland without modern instruments. But here's what's even more fascinating. These crystals weren't rare treasures locked away in chieftains' halls. They were likely commonplace tools gathered from glacial deposits or traded along Viking routes. The real innovation wasn't the stone itself, but the knowledge of how to wield it, a technique so vital. It may have been guarded as closely as any weapon. Think about the tactical advantage this gave Viking fleets. While other cultures hugged coastlines or waited for clear skies, Norse longships could strike unexpectedly, emerging from fog banks like ghosts. Raids timed to overcast days would catch defenders off guard, assuming no ships could navigate such conditions. The sunstone turned weather into a weapon. Cloud cover became camouflage, and storms became opportunities. Even their famed exploration of North America might have hinged on this technology. Without it, Leif Erikson's voyage to Vinland could have ended in endless circling rather than a new world foothold. Yet the Sunstone's legacy isn't just about wayfinding. It embodies a broader truth about ancient innovation. Sometimes the most advanced technology wasn't forged in fires but lifted from the earth itself. In an era before optics or physics textbooks, Vikings manipulated light waves with a crystal's natural properties, an intuition of science centuries ahead of its time. And like so many ancient breakthroughs, the knowledge nearly vanished. By the Middle Ages, compasses made sunstones obsolete, and the technique faded into saga fragments and speculation. Today, as we piece together these clues, we're left with a humbling realization. The Vikings' edge wasn't just their swords or ships, it was their ability to see the unseen, to pull direction from emptiness. In that sense, the Sunstone wasn't merely a tool. It was a testament to human ingenuity's quietest triumph, mastering the invisible forces that shape our world. Buried beneath China's clay warriors for over 2 millennia, a secret lay hidden in plain sight: bronze swords and spearheads untouched by time, their edges still gleaming as if freshly forged. When archaeologists first brushed the earth from these weapons in the 1970s, they expected the usual green patina of aged bronze. Instead, they found blades so pristine they could reflect sunlight after 2,000 years underground. The reason: a whisper-thin layer of chromium oxide, a protective coating that shielded the metal from decay. This wasn't just luck, it was deliberate mastery, a technological leap that shouldn't have existed in the Qin dynasty. Modern metallurgists wouldn't rediscover chromium plating until the 20th century, yet here it was, guarding the weapons of an emperor's eternal army. The process behind this ancient innovation reveals staggering sophistication. Qin artisans didn't simply dip blades in chromium, they perfected a multi-step alchemy. First, they treated bronze alloys with precise amounts of tin and lead, creating a metal both hard and flexible. Then came the real marvel: a bath of chromium-rich salts, likely derived from chromite ore or plant ashes containing trace elements. When heated, these salts bonded to the bronze at a molecular level, forming a barrier just microns thick but impervious to moisture and oxygen. The result: weapons that defied corrosion, not for years but for centuries. What's even more remarkable is the consistency. Across thousands of excavated blades, the coating's thickness varies by less than 10%, evidence of standardized production on an industrial scale. Why go to such lengths for weapons meant to be buried? The answer might lie in Qin Shi Huang's obsession with eternity. This was an emperor who sought immortality through mercury elixirs and built a subterranean empire to rule in the afterlife. If his terracotta soldiers were to serve forever, their tools couldn't succumb to rust. But there's a tantalizing alternative theory. What if these weren't just ceremonial objects? Some historians point to the weapon's functional design: razor-sharp edges, balanced weight distribution, and suggest they may have been real arms, coated for actual combat before being repurposed for the tomb. After all, the Qin military was renowned for its technological edge, from crossbows with interchangeable triggers to standardized chariot axles. Chromium plating could have been another battlefield advantage, ensuring weapons stayed lethal despite rain, blood, or time. The implications rewrite history's timeline. For centuries, chromium plating was credited to 20th century engineers seeking rust-resistant car parts and kitchen appliances. But the Terracotta Army proves the knowledge existed and was then lost long before the Industrial Revolution. How the Qin dynasty's fall in 206 BC triggered widespread destruction of technical records, and later Chinese dynasties prioritized ceramics and iron over bronze metallurgy. Without written manuals, the technique may have survived only in scattered artisan lineages before fading entirely. Modern scientists are still unraveling the full scope of this ancient ingenuity. Advanced imaging shows the chromium layer isn't uniform. It's slightly thicker near cutting edges, suggesting artisans understood where patterns and reinforced vulnerable areas. Some blades also contain traces of organic compounds, possibly lacquers or oils applied before burial, adding another layer of preservation. This level of precision hints at a metallurgical tradition far more advanced than previously assumed, one that viewed weapons not just as tools but as enduring works of science. The Terracotta Army's weapons force us to reconsider what advanced truly means. In an age without microscopes or chemistry textbooks, Qin craftsmen manipulated materials at the atomic level, achieving results modern industry would struggle to replicate without digital calipers or electrolytic baths. Their legacy isn't just in the chrome-plated blades, but in the quiet proof that innovation isn't linear, that brilliance can emerge, vanish, and wait centuries to be rediscovered. Perhaps the real eternal army isn't the clay soldiers, but the unyielding march of human ingenuity itself. The Hittite king's blade didn't just gleam, it whispered of power no other civilization could replicate. Around 1500 BCE, while rival empires clashed with bronze weapons that bent and dulled, Hittite warriors wielded daggers of a strange, dark metal that sliced through armor like parchment. This wasn't mere craftsmanship, it was alchemy turned state secret, a technological revolution forged in the fires of Anatolia's mountains. The Hittites hadn't just discovered iron, they'd mastered its transformation, heating and hammering the raw ore with techniques so closely guarded. Scribes referred to it only as the metal from heaven. What made these early iron weapons so terrifying wasn't just their hardness, it was their unpredictability. Unlike bronze, which could be cast into identical swords by any skilled smith, iron demanded esoteric knowledge. The Hittites learned to carburize their blades, packing them in charcoal during forging to infuse the metal with carbon, creating a primitive steel far tougher than anything the Bronze Age had seen. But the process was fragile. Too little carbon and the blade remained soft, too much and it became brittle. Only Hittite metalsmiths, trained through generations of trial and error, could consistently produce weapons that balanced strength and flexibility, a monopoly that made their armies nearly invincible in close combat. The economic shockwaves were even more devastating. Bronze required tin and copper, metals traded across vast networks spanning from Britain to Afghanistan. Control those trade routes and you controlled the weapons supply, but iron ore was everywhere, buried in hillsides from Greece to Egypt. The catch: no one but the Hittites knew how to work it effectively. For 2 centuries, they turned this knowledge into geopolitical leverage, demanding exorbitant prices for finished weapons while hoarding the techniques to produce them. Records from besieged cities describe the horror of facing Hittite troops, their iron daggers punching through bronze shields that had once been impenetrable, turning defensive strategies obsolete overnight. Then came the collapse. Around 1200 BCE, a perfect storm of invasion, drought, and internal rebellion shattered the Hittite Empire. As their capital burned, metalsmiths fled in all directions, taking their secrets with them. Some likely settled in Cyprus, where ironworking suddenly flourished. Others may have reached the Levant, where Philistine warriors soon wielded iron weapons of startling quality. Within generations, the monopoly was broken and the Iron Age began in earnest. But here's the twist: those early post-Hittite iron weapons were often inferior to the originals. Without the precise carburizing techniques, many blades were barely better than bronze. It would take centuries for new metallurgists to independently rediscover what the Hittites had perfected. The legacy of those Anatolian smiths echoes in an unexpected place: modern steel. The very principle of adjusting carbon content to alter metal properties, which they stumbled upon through observation and ritual, remains fundamental to metallurgy today. In that sense, every skyscraper's steel skeleton, every surgical scalpel, carries a faint whisper of those ancient daggers. The Hittites didn't just change warfare, they handed humanity the key to reshaping the material world, even if it took millennia to fully turn the lock. Alexander the Great faced a problem no conqueror had ever solved: how to storm an island city that laughed at conventional siege tactics. Tyre stood defiant, its towering walls rising straight from the Mediterranean, protected by half a mile of open water. Previous armies had simply blockaded the island and waited, but Alexander didn't have time for patience. His solution: if the sea wouldn't let him reach Tyre, he'd make the sea irrelevant. What followed wasn't just a military campaign, it was the ancient world's most staggering feat of battlefield engineering. The plan was audacious: build a kilometer-long causeway across the channel, separating the mainland from Tyre's island stronghold. To modern eyes, it might sound simple: dump rocks until a path forms. But the reality was a nightmare of logistics and improvisation. Alexander's engineers had to contend with deep water, strong currents, and Tyrian archers raining fire from the walls. They started by felling entire forests for timber, constructing a framework of wooden piles driven into the seabed. Then came the rubble stones stripped from the old mainland city of Tyre, smashed statues, even entire buildings demolished and shoved into the water. When those ran out, Alexander's soldiers filled sacks with sand and sank old ships as breakwaters. This wasn't just construction, it was an act of sheer will, inching forward under constant attack. Tyre's defenders fought back with every weapon at their disposal. They launched flaming arrows at the workers, sent divers to sabotage the pilings, and even floated burning barges toward the causeway. But Alexander adapted relentlessly. He ordered the causeway widened to protect his men, built siege towers on its advancing edge to return fire, and deployed floating screens to deflect incendiary attacks. The project became a brutal chess match. Every Tyrian countermove met with Macedonian innovation. 7 grueling months later, the impossible became reality. The causeway reached Tyre's walls, allowing Alexander's battering rams and siege engines to finally strike directly. The city fell in a single bloody assault, its myth of invincibility shattered along with its gates. But the real victory wasn't just territorial, it was psychological. Alexander had proven that no obstacle, natural or man-made, was insurmountable with enough ingenuity. His floating road foreshadowed modern military engineering triumphs like the D-Day Mulberry Harbors or the Ho Chi Minh Trail's makeshift bridges. Both relied on the same principle: mobility isn't just about movement, it's about creating the conditions to move. What makes the Tyre causeway truly remarkable isn't just its scale, but its legacy. Alexander didn't just conquer a city that day, he redefined what armies believed was possible. Future generals would study his playbook, realizing that victory often goes not to the strongest force, but to the one that can reshape the battlefield itself. The lesson echoes through history. Sometimes the greatest weapon isn't a sword or a catapult, but the vision to see roads where others see only water. The sacred band of Thebes didn't just fight together, they loved together. Imagine a battlefield where every soldier stood beside their most cherished companion, not out of duty but devotion. This elite unit of 150 pairs of lovers wasn't just a military experiment, it was a psychological masterstroke. Their founder, the Theban commander Gorgidas, understood something radical for 4th century BC Greece. Bonds of the heart could forge bonds of steel. While other armies relied on discipline or fear, the sacred band drew strength from something far more potent: the refusal to retreat or falter in front of someone they couldn't bear to disappoint. Their tactical cohesion was legendary. Where ordinary phalanxes might fracture under pressure, the sacred band moved as a single entity. Each warrior fought not just for victory, but to protect the man beside him, literally. Ancient accounts describe their formations as unbreakable, with pairs maneuvering in perfect sync, shielding each other's blind spots without hesitation. At the Battle of Leuctra in 371 BC, they shattered the myth of Spartan invincibility, outflanking and annihilating a force twice their size. The key wasn't superior weapons or numbers, it was their willingness to die for one another without question. Yet their greatest strength also held the seeds of their downfall. When Philip Roman II of Macedon and his young son Alexander faced them at Chaeronea in 338 BC, they didn't attack the band head-on. Instead, Philip feigned retreat, luring the Thebans into overextending. As the lovers surged forward, desperate to press their advantage, Macedonian cavalry hammered into their exposed flanks. The result was slaughter, but even in defeat, their loyalty held. Archaeologists later found their mass grave, pairs buried arm in arm, their skeletons still locked in embrace centuries later. The sacred band's legacy echoes in modern special forces. From Navy SEAL to the French Foreign Legion, elite units now deliberately foster intense camaraderie, recognizing that emotional bonds outperform cold discipline in life or death situations. The US military's buddy system and Israel's unit-based conscription both trace back to the same insight. When soldiers care deeply for their comrades, they fight harder, think clearer, and endure longer. Theban poets called it eros, not just romance, but the fierce, protective love that turns men into something more than human on the battlefield. What makes their story timeless isn't just their skill, but the uncomfortable truth it reveals about warfare. For all our focus on technology, swords, guns, drones, the most devastating weapon might be the human heart. The sacred band didn't need secret formulas or unbreakable steel. Their edge was simpler and far more ancient, the unshakable belief that some things are worth dying for, especially when the person beside you feels the same. In the end, that's a force no invention can replicate. The Carthaginians didn't just break enemy gates, they strolled right through them, hidden inside gifts too tempting to refuse. Ancient historians describe a tactic so audacious, it makes the Trojan horse look like child's play. Hollow bronze statues of horses, their gleaming shells packed with elite soldiers, rolled up to besieged cities as offerings of peace. The moment those gates creaked open to accept the tribute, warriors would burst forth, swords flashing, turning deception into slaughter. But here's the burning question: was this brilliant stratagem real, or just propaganda crafted to terrify Rome's allies? The story first surfaces in fragments of Greek and Roman accounts, portraying Carthage as a city that weaponized art. Unlike the wooden Trojan horse, these horses were said to be cast from bronze, their hollow bellies large enough to hold a dozen armed men. The craftsmanship alone would have been staggering, requiring smiths to engineer hinged panels or removable sections that could be secured from the inside. Imagine the precision needed, seams tight enough to avoid suspicion, yet quick to release, interiors padded to muffle sound, ventilation holes disguised as decorative etchings. If true, this wasn't just a trick. It was a masterpiece of psychological and mechanical warfare. Yet skeptics point to glaring holes in the tale. No archaeological evidence of these hollow horses has ever been found, despite Carthage's ruins yielding everything from intricate jewelry to siege engines. The accounts also suspiciously mirror older myths, like the Trojan horse, raising the possibility that Rome exaggerated Carthaginian cunning to justify their own brutal campaigns. After all, painting an enemy as deceitful made their destruction seem righteous. There's another twist. Carthage's own records were systematically burned after the Third Punic War, leaving only their enemies' versions of history. But let's assume for a moment that the hollow horses were real. The implications are fascinating. This would mean Carthage's generals understood something modern special forces know intimately. The best way to breach a fortress isn't always over the walls, but through the enemy's psychology. Gifts, especially those symbolizing strength or divine favor, played on human vanity and ritual. A city under siege, desperate for hope, might lower its guard for a sacred offering. The horses also exploited a tactical blind spot. Most defenses prepared for frontal assaults or tunneling, not sabotage disguised as surrender. Even if the story is myth, its persistence reveals a deeper truth. Ancient warfare wasn't just about who had the sharpest swords or tallest walls. It was about who could manipulate perception most effectively. The hollow horse legend, whether fact or fiction, cemented Carthage's reputation as a civilization that fought with brains as much as bronze. And in the end, that reputation may have been their most enduring weapon of all. Ancient Indian epics whisper of a metal so extraordinary, it could carve through rock as effortlessly as a knife slices fruit. The Vedas call it Seric iron, a substance described with such reverence. Modern scholars still debate whether it was metallurgical fact or poetic fantasy. Unlike Damascus steel, which left behind physical artifacts for analysis, Seric iron exists only in tantalizing descriptions. Blades that never lost their edge, armor that turned aside any weapon, and tools that could shape stone with uncanny precision. These accounts paint a picture of a material so advanced it bordered on alchemy. But separating legend from reality requires diving into the shadows where history and mythology blur. The key to understanding Seric iron lies in its proposed composition. Some historians argue it was an early form of ultra-high carbon steel, forged through techniques even more refined than those used for Damascus blades. Ancient Indian smiths were known to work with Wootz ingots, the same raw material famed in the Middle East, but with a crucial difference. Texts suggest they subjected the metal to repeated heating and quenching cycles in precise atmospheric conditions, possibly using specific types of charcoal or mineral additives to alter its crystalline structure. The result, a steel so dense and finely grained, it achieved near-mythical properties. Imagine a sword that didn't just hold its edge after battles, but grew sharper with use, its molecular structure realigning under stress like a self-honing blade. Yet skeptics point to the absence of physical evidence. Not a single artifact has been definitively identified as Seric iron, despite India's rich archaeological record. This raises an unsettling possibility. What if the metal's reputation outstripped its actual capabilities? Ancient chroniclers weren't above embellishment, especially when praising the gifts of kings or the prowess of armies. A blade that could cut stone might simply have been a well-tempered sword capable of chipping rock under ideal conditions, a feat impressive enough to inspire legend without defying metallurgy. The mystery deepens when we consider how such knowledge could vanish. India's ironworking traditions were among the most sophisticated of the ancient world, with the iron pillar of Delhi standing as a testament to their corrosion-resistant alloys. But the subcontinent's turbulent history invaded, fractured, and rebuilt countless times, likely scattered or erased specialized techniques. Oral traditions died with master smiths, and written records crumbled in monsoon humidity or were lost to deliberate destruction. By the time European colonists arrived, Seric iron had faded into folklore, leaving behind only cryptic verses in texts like the Arthashastra, which cryptically allude to iron that drinks light like nectar. Modern attempts to recreate Seric iron have yielded intriguing near misses. Metallurgists experimenting with traditional Indian furnaces and local ores have produced steels with exceptional hardness, though nothing matching the legendary descriptions. Some speculate the secret ingredient might have been an organic catalyst, perhaps plant extracts or even fermented compounds that altered the metal's properties during smelting. Others propose Seric iron wasn't a single alloy at all, but a class of metals tailored for specific purposes, with the stone-cutting variety being a specialized tool steel lost when demand for megalithic architecture declined. The enduring fascination with Seric iron isn't just about solving a metallurgical puzzle. It's a window into how ancient civilizations perceived technological mastery. In a world where material science was indistinguishable from magic, the line between achievable excellence and divine gift was thin. A blade that never dulled might as well have been enchanted, and the smith who forged it could be revered as a mystic. This cultural lens makes it even harder to discern truth, were the text recording fact or weaving allegories about perfection. Perhaps the most poignant lesson lies in Seric iron's elusiveness. Its legend reminds us that history isn't a steady march of progress, but a tapestry riddled with holes. Brilliance flares in one era only to fade in another, leaving behind echoes that taunt later generations. The quest to rediscover Seric iron isn't just about recreating a metal, it's about reclaiming a mindset, a way of seeing the physical world not as fixed, but as endlessly malleable in the hands of those daring enough to reshape it. And in that sense, the search continues, not in laboratories alone, but in the spaces between our assumptions about what the past was truly capable of. The Romans didn't just conquer with brute force, they rewrote the rules of engagement with machines that turned tension into terror. The Ballista, their crowning achievement in artillery, was no mere catapult. It was a masterpiece of precision engineering, capable of hurling a spear-sized bolt clean through a man at 300 yards with the accuracy of a modern sniper rifle. What made this possible wasn't brute strength, but a system so elegantly complex it rivaled clockwork, twisted ropes of animal sinew, coiled tighter than a spring, storing enough energy to launch projectiles with mathematical consistency. This wasn't just a weapon, it was physics weaponized. Picture the mechanics: two massive wooden arms, each anchored to a bundle of sinew ropes wound to a calibrated torsion. When cranked back, these ropes twisted like rubber bands, storing phenomenal energy. Release the trigger, and the arms snapped forward, propelling bolts with enough force to skewer multiple enemies in a single shot. The genius lay in the tuning. Each sinew bundle had to be twisted to identical tension, ensuring symmetrical force. Roman engineers even accounted for humidity, knowing wet weather loosened the fibers and required adjustments. This wasn't guesswork, it was repeatable ballistics centuries before Newton's laws. On the battlefield, ballistae became force multipliers. During sieges, they peppered defenders with deadly volleys, clearing walls before ladders even touched stone. Naval variants mounted on ship decks could punch through enemy hulls below the waterline, a tactic Julius Caesar famously employed against Gaulish fleets. But their most chilling use was psychological. Unlike trebuchets that lobbed chaotic boulders, ballistae fired with eerie predictability. Troops knew when a bolt was coming, the distinctive twang of released sinew, but dodging was futile. At the Battle of Alesia, ballistic crews reportedly pinned fleeing warriors to trees like grotesque trophies, a spectacle that shattered enemy morale faster than any charge. What's astonishing is how these machines blurred the line between ancient and modern warfare. Reconstructions show some ballistae could hit targets the size of a shield at 2 football fields distance, accuracy unmatched until rifled barrels in the 19th century. Medieval engineers later copied their torsion principles for catapults, but never quite matched Roman precision. The difference: standardization. Legion workshops mass-produced ballistae parts to interchangeable specifications, ensuring every machine performed identically. This wasn't just craftsmanship, it was early industrial thinking applied to destruction. Yet the ballista's legacy isn't just in its mechanics, it's in the mindset it represents. The Romans didn't see war as a contest of courage, but as a problem of applied science. Why risk soldiers when physics could do the killing? In that sense, the ballista was more than a weapon. It was the birth of long-range warfare, where victory went not to the bravest, but to those who could calculate force, distance, and fear with cold precision. And that's a revolution no empire has ever undone. The walls of the Temple of Zeus didn't just stand guard, they listened. Carved from stone and shaped by mathematical precision, this ancient fortress hid an ingenious secret, a whispering gallery that transformed its very architecture into an invisible spy. Picture a sentry pressing his ear to a curved wall, catching the faintest murmur of enemy scouts planning their attack from hundreds of feet away. This wasn't magic, it was physics weaponized, an acoustic trick so subtle, invaders never realized their whispers were being stolen. The science behind these sonic traps reveals just how sophisticated ancient engineers could be. By designing walls with precise parabolic curves, sound waves traveling along the surface would reflect and converge at specific points, allowing even the softest conversations to be overheard by defenders stationed at focal nodes. The effect mimicked modern directional microphones, except these devices were carved from solid limestone, their effectiveness baked into the blueprint. Similar galleries have been found in structures from the oracle chamber at Delphi to the subterranean passages of Mayan pyramids, proving this wasn't a fluke, but a widespread tactic in the ancient world's espionage toolkit. At the Sicilian fortress of Euryalus, this principle reached its zenith. The walls flanking the main gate were engineered with hollow, resonating chambers that amplified footsteps and clinking armor, turning the approach into an early warning system. Defenders could literally hear an invasion coming before the enemy was in sight, but the real stroke of genius, the galleries doubled as psychological weapons. Invaders who noticed their plans being anticipated might suspect traitors in their ranks, sowing paranoia that crippled morale before the first arrow flew. What's startling is how these techniques mirror modern surveillance just without electricity. Today's laser microphones and vibration sensors perform the same function as those curved walls, just with silicon instead of stone. The ancients lacked our technology, but not our ingenuity. They understood that information is power, whether gleaned from a tapped phone line or a resonating temple corridor. Yet the most haunting examples come from the East. Chinese military treatises describe earth-listening jars, ceramic pots buried at intervals along fortress walls, their open mouths flush with the ground. When enemy sappers dug tunnels, the vibrations would hum through these jars like submarine sonar, revealing the digger's location. Some were even tuned to specific frequencies, acting as primitive filters to distinguish between harmless animal burrows and actual siege operations. The lesson etched into these silent sentinels isn't just about eavesdropping, it's about reimagining the battlefield itself. Why waste spies when your walls could do the reconnaissance for you? In an age before electronics, the difference between victory and defeat might have hinged on something as simple as the shape of a stone or the curve of a chamber. And that's a kind of genius no amount of modern gadgetry can diminish. The Copish didn't just cut, it commanded. With its crescent blade curving like a lion's claw, this iconic Egyptian weapon was as much a symbol as it was a tool of war. Unlike the straight swords of rival civilizations, the Copish's distinctive hook-shaped design fused the slashing power of an axe with the precision of a sword, creating a hybrid that dominated close combat. But its true power lay beyond physics. This was a weapon engineered to terrify. When raised in the golden glare of the desert sun, the Copish became a flash of divine judgment, its silhouette echoing the sacred sickle used to harvest both grain and enemies alike. Archaeological finds reveal the Copish's dual role as both battlefield implement and ceremonial object. Tomb paintings show pharaohs wielding it to smite foes in ritual scenes, its arc mirroring the curve of the solar disk, a visual link between royal authority and cosmic order. The message was unmistakable. To face the Copish was to challenge the gods themselves. Even its construction reinforced this mystique. Early versions were cast from bronze so pure it gleamed like sunlight, while later iterations incorporated iron from meteorites, earning it the epithet "blade from the stars." Imagine standing in a shield wall as an Egyptian charge advanced, their Copishes catching the dawn light like 100 falling comets. The psychological toll would have been as crushing as the blades themselves. Tactically, the Copish exploited weaknesses in contemporary armor. Its curved tip could hook over shields, yanking them aside to expose vulnerable flesh, while the weighted outer edge delivered devastating chops capable of shearing through leather and bone. Yet what made it truly revolutionary was its versatility. The inner curve near the hilt allowed for precise, surgical thrusts, a feature absent in most slashing weapons of the era. This duality forced opponents into impossible choices: brace for a crushing blow or risk a lightning-fast stab. Surviving training manuals describe drills where warriors alternated between sweeping strikes and sudden jabs, keeping adversaries perpetually off balance. The Copish's decline offers a fascinating glimpse into how warfare evolves. By the New Kingdom period, lighter, straight swords began replacing it, not because they were deadlier, but because they suited new battlefield realities. As chariot warfare and massed infantry tactics spread, speed and reach trumped raw intimidation. Yet the Copish never fully vanished. Its legacy persisted in the curved blades of Assyrian warriors and even medieval falchions, a testament to a design so effective it transcended its era. Perhaps the most telling detail comes from an unlikely source: enemy accounts. Hittite scrolls describe captured Copishes being melted down not for their metal, but to erase their accursed shadow. To them, the weapon wasn't just steel, it was a manifestation of Egyptian might, an idea as sharp as its edge. And in that truth lies the real lesson of the Copish. The most enduring weapons aren't those that kill efficiently, but those that live rent-free in the minds of those who fear them. The brazen bull of Syracuse wasn't just a torture device. It was theater of the macabre, engineered to turn suffering into spectacle. According to ancient accounts, the bronze monstrosity stood hollow, its belly large enough to hold a man, with a complex system of pipes and chambers designed to distort screams into the bellowing of a bull. The victim would be sealed inside, a fire lit beneath, and as the metal glowed red-hot, their agonized cries would emerge not as human, but as the roar of a beast. Historians still debate whether this horror ever truly existed, or if it was a legend crafted to warn against tyranny's excesses. But the psychology behind its design is undeniable. It weaponized not just pain, but perception. turning execution into something monstrous and surreal. The earliest mentions come from the writings of Diodorus Siculus, who claimed the bull was commissioned by the tyrant Phalaris in the 6th century BC. Yet here's the twist: Phalaris himself became synonymous with cruelty, and later Greek writers insisted he'd been the bull's first victim, a poetic justice that smells more of moral fable than fact. No archaeological evidence of the bull has ever surfaced, not even in Syracuse's well-preserved ruins, but the story persisted, retold by Roman authors like Cicero, who used it as a rhetorical cudgel against corruption. This raises a provocative question: was the brazen bull history or propaganda, a real artifact of ancient sadism, or a cautionary myth so vivid it colonized the collective imagination? Engineering analysis suggests the bull's alleged acoustic trickery wasn't beyond ancient capabilities. Bronze workers of the era routinely crafted intricate musical instruments and hydraulic systems with precise tubing. A skilled metalsmith could have designed chambers to modulate pitch, transforming screams into lower frequency roars. The real barrier was motive, not means. While rulers like Nero or Caligula might revel in such brutality, most tyrants preferred efficient executions over elaborate, fuel-intensive spectacles. The bull's value lay less in its utility than its symbolism, a metaphor for how power could dehumanize, reducing people to animalistic noise. What's chilling is how the legend evolved. Medieval Christians adapted it as a parable of martyrdom, claiming saints roasted inside the bull prayed so fervently, their voices emerged as heavenly hymns instead of roars. Alchemists later saw it as an allegory for purification by fire, the base metal of the body yielding the gold of the soul. Even modern psychology borrows the imagery, using brazen bull syndrome to describe systems that distort human suffering into something palatable or even entertaining. Whether real or not, the bull's legacy endures because it taps into a primal fear, the terror of being erased, of having your pain rewritten as something alien. That's why it haunts us more than simpler torture devices. The rack or the Iron Maiden merely broke bodies. The bull sought to annihilate identity itself, turning a person's final moments into a grotesque performance. And in that, it reveals a dark truth about technological cruelty. The most enduring horrors aren't those that inflict the most pain, but those that weaponize the very act of being seen, or heard, or remembered. The bull's roar wasn't just sound, it was the echo of power asserting its right to redefine reality. From Greek fire to Damascus steel, the alchemy of ancient warfare forces us to rethink everything we assume about the past. These weren't just weapons, they were flashes of brilliance so advanced, they blurred the line between science and myth. But here's the unsettling truth: for every innovation we've rediscovered, countless others may have vanished without a trace. History isn't a straight path from primitive to advanced. It's a labyrinth of dead ends and buried masterpieces, where entire chapters of ingenuity were erased by war, time, or deliberate suppression. Consider the eerie parallels between then and now. The Roman concrete that healed its own cracks mirrors our experiments with self-repairing polymers. Heron's steam-powered automata feel like blueprints for the Industrial Revolution, misplaced for millennia. Even the Viking Sunstone, with its manipulation of polarized light, foreshadowed modern optics. These weren't accidents, they were the work of minds every bit as sharp as our own, operating without the benefit of accumulated knowledge. Imagine where we'd be if their discoveries had been preserved instead of lost. The Dark Ages might never have been dark at all, yet the most tantalizing question isn't about what we've found, it's about what's still hidden. Could there be entire libraries of knowledge buried beneath deserts or submerged in forgotten shipwrecks? The Antikythera mechanism, a 2,000-year-old astronomical computer, was dismissed as impossible until its gears were pulled from the sea. Who's to say similar marvels don't lie waiting? The sands of Egypt, the jungles of the Amazon, even the cellars of medieval monasteries could hold fragments of technologies we've yet to imagine. This isn't just about satisfying curiosity. Understanding these lost arts reshapes our view of human potential. When we uncover an ancient innovation, it's not just a relic, it's a reminder that brilliance isn't bound by era or infrastructure. A Roman engineer staring at a chunk of volcanic ash couldn't see molecules, but through trial and intuition, he created concrete stronger than anything we could make until the 20th century. That's the real lesson. Progress isn't inevitable. It's fragile, easily derailed by catastrophe or short-sightedness. So where does that leave us? On the brink, perhaps? Every archaeological dig, every newly translated manuscript could append another assumption about our ancestors' capabilities. Maybe the next breakthrough won't come from a lab, but from a scrap of parchment or a corroded artifact, whispering secrets across the centuries. The past isn't finished teaching us, not by a long shot. Now it's your turn. What lost technology fascinates you most? Could there be inventions so revolutionary their very existence was scrubbed from history? Drop your theories below and let's keep unraveling these mysteries together. And if you're hungry for more deep dives into history's shadowy corners, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what we uncover next.